Hello and welcome to Ranks FC, where we're here to describe, talk about, and have a little conversation about Erling Haaland signing for Manchester City. As you can see, back from his honeymoon and having a good old time. Back in studio, it's Mr. Sam Ty, the Rank God. How you doing, mate? You well?
I'm great, thank you, mate. I'm great. What news to return to? Turns out
Yeah.
football was put on ice just for a 3-week period. Real Madrid and Manchester City having a bit of a mad one, notwithstanding while I was away. Very nice of Manchester City and Erling Haaland to wait a good 3 weeks for me to return in order to drop this bombshell. Happy return to work day, Sam.
Yeah, no rest for the wicked, mate. It's straight back into it and straight back at it. Right, let's talk about this. I suppose, like Manchester City, as we've said in various places, have signed probably, well, the best number 9, or at least the best young number 9 in the world right now, according to quite a lot of people. The complete forward that is Erling Haaland, and look, we know all about his goal record. I'm sure we'll touch on it in some detail, but what does Erling Haaland bring to Manchester City, aside from that?
Okay, so where do you want to start? I mean, we've got a kind of modern mold of forward here that's starting to emerge over the last 2, 3, 4 years. Kind of like a mobile target man that we've talked about in the past. I think football has got to a point with its pressing strategies and the amount of space that's constricted in the middle of the field, whereby basically the only space that exists for forwards to operate in is behind the incredibly high defensive lines that people are starting to use. So any target man over the last 5 years in football has basically had to learn how to run again, have to learn how to accelerate, to explode out of the blocks, and not just be a big physical presence, but be a channel runner as well. Has to be a two-way player. So Erling Haaland, along with maybe Romelu Lukaku, are kind of like the prototypes for this kind of player. They are strong as an oak. They've got limbs like tree trunks, but yet they're fast, they're explosive, they can hold you off and spin past you, they can run the channel and receive the ball to feet. I guess in many ways, they are the complete forward nowadays. And Erling Haaland at such a young age has already shown that he has pretty much every string to his bow, not just the goal scoring, but everything else too, the physical aspects, the speed, the strength, the attitude, the killer instincts, the composure. I mean, the list just goes on. Talent-wise, very few can touch him.
Yeah, no, I think so. And look, when you look at Manchester City and what they brought to the table this season, they're a chance creating machine, right? This is a side that creates chance after chance, and not just that, high quality chance after high quality chance. And look, they've been criticized for not playing with a traditional number 9. There were obviously those links to Harry Kane last summer that never came to fruition. But we are looking here at a team who's played most of the season utilizing players, I wouldn't necessarily say out of position, but at least sort of shifting players into positions they're not perhaps the most comfortable with. We've seen Pep talk about the fact that whilst Phil Foden has had good periods as a false 9 in inverted commas, that he's not quite that kind of player who has the ability to find calm in the madness in there. And that's what Pep wants from those kind of players. Instead, they're replacing that with not only Erling Haaland, but Julian Alvarez as well. This is, probably the best young number 9 in the world in Haaland. And then a player who a lot of us are very, very excited about in Alvarez as a backup. Is this Pep switching back to a traditional format?
I mean, time will tell in terms of how these players are deployed. I thought I had him pegged one way with Julian Alvarez. He really felt like the Pep Guardiola striker, who was a striker, but kind of also wasn't really a striker, like didn't want to spend like that much time in the box. Yes, would drop in deep and try to link play, but would often try and send the ball wide and then arrive late into the box. He's not the kind of player who is occupying centre backs or occupying more than one centre back to create space for others. So he and Haaland are very different types of forward. And I don't know what Pep's thinking now. I mean, obviously it's really healthy to have the different options and the different styles to choose from. But in basically selecting Alvarez and Haaland as next season's strike force, I think he's got us all confused right now. He's got us all on the run. I don't know what to think. I don't know what he's planning. I'm very excited. I feel a little bit sorry for Gabby Jesus. This is probably curtains for him with 2 new strikers coming in. I'm sure we can get to the impact of that in a little bit later on. But I think the main question for me is, how is Pep going to utilize Erling Haaland? And you said there, how are they going to mesh together? This has to be a return to a more traditional style of forward. It simply has to be. This is not like plugging a 9.5 in. This is not like putting Foden in the box. This is a player who wants to run onto the ball, right? That is like the number one way that he wants to receive the ball is in the channel ahead of him and wants to run onto it. Yes, he's got other facets to his game, but that is the, if you could pick 5 passes to play to Erling Haaland, they'd all be for him to chase, in my opinion. That is not how Manchester City play. To be honest, Jack Grealish doesn't really suit Man City either. And I think the signings of Grealish and Haaland together in consecutive summers do point to something. I'm not sure exactly what it is. He's now made 2 extremely expensive acquisitions, very, very good players, not very Pep players in certain templates. So I'm very intrigued to see how it plays out.
Yeah, I mean, look, firstly, hello to everybody in the comments. Hello to everybody watching. I've really enjoyed this slew of Happy Easter, Merry Christmas, afternoon, morning, evening from the gang. But Dominic asked a question here. Says, I'm not really convinced his profile is conducive to Pep City and vice versa. Alvarez is for sure. Haaland, not so much, but they'll be coaching to change Haaland. Do you want to change a player like Erling Haaland? Do you want to adapt him, or do you want to allow those raw attributes which have scored so many goals at the levels he's played at so far to thrive in the places where you'd expect them to thrive?
I mean, it's a very good question, Dominic. And, I think last summer, 12 months ago, I'd have said, nah, don't worry about that. That's going to be fine. Like either Haaland will fit in, or he'll learn to play in a more patient style of play. But there's this shining example. I shouldn't say shining. It's not a shining example at all. It's the complete opposite. There's this example of Romelu Lukaku and Thomas Tuchel, which is just, bugging me. It's really bugging me because Haaland and Lukaku likes to receive quick balls from back to front, and they want to play with intensity. They want to receive the ball early. They want to get the foot on it. They can chase it, or they can have it play to feet. But ultimately, they want you to skip the midfield line, and they want you to play to them, and then they will continue the attack, and they will become the focal point. And City, particularly with someone like Foden up front and someone like Sterling up front, they don't involve the number 9 until the very last touch, and ideally for them, that touch then goes into the back of the net. It's a very different way of operating. And looking at Lukaku and the way he struggled to adapt to Thomas Tuchel's much more patient style of play that doesn't really involve him much in terms of touches, it is a worry and it is a concern. I guess the counter argument to that is that Haaland is 21 years of age. He is putty in the hands of Pep Guardiola. Yes, he has his clear strengths, but he has such a well-rounded game that you'd back Guardiola to either change to him, or Haaland is not too old to change to him. So I don't know where this goes. And that is the number one point of intrigue here. But I think it is a bad clash of styles. And it is reminiscent of Tuchel and Lukaku. And we already have one example where it's not really working that well.
Yeah, I mean, there is that element of patience in the way that Tuchel has set up those teams. And there is also a point to be made that, Erling Haaland is a player who wants to score goals, right? He wants to lead teams to glory, and he spoke already about his ambition in his career to score more goals than he's played games, right? And I think when you look at what he's done over his last 2 clubs, let's just talk about, Salzburg and Dortmund here for, the time being. He scored 114 goals in 115 games for those 2 clubs in all competitions. It is a ridiculous strike rate at, 2 levels where he made the jump seamlessly from the Austrian Bundesliga to the Bundesliga. And now there's another, I wouldn't say jump in terms of quality, but definitely jump in terms of style to the Premier League. And we're having to, look at this and kind of assume that things are going to be different. That said, if Haaland has to become a penalty box monster in order to fit in with Pep Guardiola's system and in order to thrive of the creative players around him, I can see him doing that.
Yes, me too. I mean, he can definitely fulfill the brief of penalty box monster, no question. And you've already talked about how City are a chance creation machine. So it's not like Erling Haaland is going to be struggling for opportunities to shoot at goal. They do tend to create more opportunities and more shooting chances than Chelsea do. That said, we've got another example of this as recently as Real Madrid. These chances are often falling to the wide players, right? They're not necessarily falling to the central striker. So no matter which way you look at it, there is some adaptation to be made. And Haaland is going to have to adapt to Premier League physicality and speed as well. Again, we've seen a number of Bundesliga attackers step into the Premier League recently. And they have really, really struggled with how scrappy it is in close quarters and how intense it is on the legs. I used to think that the Bundesliga was the perfect preparation for the Premier League because the Bundesliga is so intense as well. But I can't help but watch all of these players step into the Premier League and really struggle physically initially. And Kai Havertz is a good example of that, but so is Timo Werner, so is Milot Rashica, so is Leon Bailey. It's a long list. Like most of the attackers that have come from the Bundesliga so far have not really got up to speed very quickly at all, if at all. Now, Erling Haaland is different. It seems like he's a top 10 striker in the world already, and it should be okay. So he's not going to struggle physically in terms of strength, but there's going to be an intensity question, and the defenders are going to try and give him hell, and we'll see how it works. But it is a stylistic upgrade, isn't it? And a different change, because Austria to Germany just is barely any different. The players are better, obviously, in Germany, but the style of play is basically the same. So he had no issues there whatsoever, and this is a really big test. Do you not remember about a year ago we were hearing reports that Haaland was looking to avoid the Premier League for his first move? Does that ring a bell?
Yeah, it did interest me, but I suppose that was I think that's the extra year, right? That's just the extra year speaking. You have a year where you go, right, I don't want to move to the Premier League. I'm actually going to move last summer. He ends up not moving last summer, sticking around for another year. And I think that was his gap year, if you will, in many ways. I didn't mean that in terms of you popping off to Thailand for to find yourself and find some fancy trousers. But like that was the gap year he had. If he'd gone last summer, I think he might have gone and done 2 years elsewhere before making this move. I think doing the extra year and also necessarily how it's gone for him this season, I think is probably different. And look, we have to come on to this question about injuries, right? Because there are questions about, how these things come. And we go to Yoel here, who says, shouldn't there be a worry that the intensity of the Premier League would just contribute to his injury proneness? And I do love that Dean Jones is his profile picture. But,
so Dean was available for the live stream after all. Yeah. He did join us.
It's the burner, the Dean burner.
Good to have you with us. No, we know Joel very well, and kudos, Joel. You keep using those pictures of Dean. I love it. I prefer that to when you use pictures of me. Anyway, yeah, definitely. Like in a word, definitely in terms of concerns for injuries. I mean, all the injuries are they're tweaks and strains and muscle strains, and they're 2-3 week injuries. That's not promising. You look at how the physical build of Erling Haaland, and you look at the way he is actually put together. You look at the size of his limbs and like the strain on the hamstrings and the combination of the weight of him and the speed and explosion that he moves with. And you do worry when those injuries are starting to rack up. Like you can't help but be worried. And when you're making a massive investment, it's one of the first things you look at, availability. Like how much of a risk is this? And I would imagine that Erling Haaland has concerned a few people at this point. And obviously the tweet from Man City is, subject to medicals. I'm not suggesting for 1 second that Erling Haaland is going to fail a medical, but they're going to look at that. They're going to look at his hamstrings and his calves, and they're going to take a look at the wear and tear on them, and they're going to get a good idea of exactly how risky this is. I don't think we can put the injury thing to one side at all. I don't think that's fair. Like if you miss basically half a season, which is roughly what he's missed, right? This season. I mean, he's on 20 starts and there are 34 games in the Bundesliga. It won't be half, but it's not that much more than 60% of availability. And it's definitely something to be wary of.
I'm a bit less worried about this than I think you are. And part of that is because I'm not sure what Marco Rose is doing at Dortmund, but it seems to be injuring everybody. And I think Haaland is potentially not the opposite of benefiting, if I'm honest. I think he's struggling with that. I think whatever Rosa is doing in terms of training and trying to, heighten that intensity and build something there, we've seen so many injuries and muscular injuries for Dortmund this season. This is not a one-off case. These have been spread throughout the squad. They are not, easy to write off. And I do think that Haaland has probably suffered because of this as well as anybody else has. The problem with that is, does it impact you going forward? Because obviously once something is broken, it can be easily broken again. And there are those elements of once you start to suffer injuries, they can start to pile up. So it's interesting in terms of, what you're doing next. But, there are these kind of questions over that I'm not completely convinced.
Yeah, it's impossible to say if this completely clears up under a new medical department and manager, or if the damage is kind of already sort of seeded in there and it will be a factor moving forward. I mean, we can look at his injury history for his whole career and we can see that, yes, he had a couple of bumps and bruises at RB Salzburg, but he was ill had a slight abdominal issue, had a knee problem, and had a bruise, and missed 4 separate chunks in one season. But illness is one thing, and an injury is another. It didn't seem anywhere near as bad. Whereas with Dortmund, it's got 8 or 9 separate entries: muscular problems, hip flexor, muscular problems, torn muscle fiber, knee problem. It is like, it's not a good looking injury record for a 21-year-old. And
No.
I'm always and forever bringing up the example of Michael Owen. And I'm always living in fear that Mbappe does his hamstring, because Mbappe is, the way he's built, he's one serious hamstring away from his career completely changing, right? And that's just the way it is. It's because these players are built in such a fine-tuned way, and they perform with such explosivity that if the body gives way, the body gives way, and they will suddenly become genuinely about 60% of the player. Now, Haaland is kind of in that. I mean, physically he looks a bit different to Mbappe, but I mean, we're talking about the same level of explosivity, and we're talking about more weight and more power behind it. And it's almost like a unique build. And it is impossible to say like what impact this has going forward. I feel like we've got a bit negative here.
Yeah, I mean,
Is it
I've seen some questions. No, Stuart says here, surely City's ability to rotate Haaland out of the 11 will help keep him fit for the business end of the season, predominantly the Champions League. And Tarsif says something very similar. Pep should have enough options to rotate to avoid injuries. Dortmund relied too much on Haaland. And both of those things are probably true, right? Pep is a manager. We've seen this already, right? Who's happy to rely on the words of his medical staff. We've seen him go, okay, I'll leave players out here because my medical staff have told me I have to. And I think he will be the same in this kind of regard. A couple more questions to kind of get through. Look, I think the thing is that there's going to be overwhelming positivity about this because City have just signed one of the best number 9s in the world. Yeah. And so therefore the questions that people are asking are probably going to be looking at things, right? But, these are, Trevor says, is this the end for Jesus? Gabriel, not Jesus. And I would suggest the answer is, probably yes, sadly. Obviously, there's links to Arsenal. We'd have to have Dean on to get the full kind of lowdown, but it does feel that way.
Yeah, I think it probably does. I mean, this has been years coming. If it is the end for Gabriel Jesus, and he's had a really good run at City. He's scored a good amount of goals for the minutes that he's been given. He's played multiple positions. He's stepped in when it's required and then stepped out for long periods. He's had a good stint, but it was pretty inevitable, wasn't it, that once Aguero had gone, that at some point they were going to have to look for something a little bit better. Gabriel Jesus is a fine footballer. He's a top 30 striker in world football, probably. This is Man City. This is a team that want to win the Champions League and want to clock up 100 points in the league. Like, you're going to have to get a bit better and a bit bigger than that. And they have done with Erling Haaland. They just have. And you look at the kind of depth chart now, and even this season, when City literally don't have a striker, Jesus has made his biggest impact on the right wing half the time. Against Liverpool, he was amazing. He absolutely bullied Andy Robertson. So is there still technically a future for him on the right wing, I think, in this Manchester City side, if he wants it. But if I were him at this point, with this many trophies under my belt, and this much evidence at the top level, I personally would be thinking, all right, fine, you're going to go with Haaland, you're going to go with Julian Alvarez. Cool, man. I'm gonna look for something else. I want to be a more valued part. I want to play as a central striker. Brazil will need him to do that for their future, and I think he's at the point of his career now, mid-20s, where that probably should be the focus, because he could say to himself, "Yeah, I'll play on the right," but he's still Mahrez, and Raheem Sterling is going to have to work his way back into this rotation, and Grealish presumably becomes more important. And yeah, Bernardo Silva might leave, but I don't think that impacts the front three or the wingers and the forward, really. I don't
think Bernardo Silva is going to leave. I'll be perfectly honest with you. I'm pretty convinced that he doesn't.
I'm suspecting that Gundogan leaves. I think Gundogan's time at City
have some injuries and some injury concerns, so I think it might be his turn to move on. Also, he's far older than Bernardo Silva, and therefore, far less of an asset in terms of those things.
Before the Foden false 9 experiment this season, these were the two players, Gundogan and Bernardo, who were basically rotating into the 9 spot in December. And you're right, they're bolstering that number 9 spot with 2 more players now. So Gundogan's kind of utility has dropped quite significantly. I think he might have some back problems as well, man. Like, I don't think he's in the greatest physical shape. So Bernardo probably sticks around because he can't afford to lose both Bernardo and Gundogan, even if he has signed 2 strikers.
Well, he's going to lose Fernandinho as well. So, there's lots going on there in those regards. A couple more before we call this off. Zach says, you guys mentioned in a pod a while ago, he might even play on the left. Do you think that would still happen? I think what we were getting at here was that, I think the answer is probably no. But you know how Pep sides work, right? They float in and out. Players dip in and out of positions. There are suggestions as opposed to fixed positions for many players, and they can interchange. Do I think he will be starting as a left winger? No. Do I think that Haaland might well drift out to the left in order to drive from deeper at defenders? Yeah, plausibly, especially if City are looking to play in transition. I know it's not something that happens all the time, but you can see him moving into spaces in order to be able to really stretch his legs.
Can you imagine Man City setting out and attempting to play in transition?
Haaland playing as a false right back.
I mean, it just doesn't happen. This is back to the earlier question, which was, his style. How many opportunities is he going to get to receive a sort of 30-yard pass to Laporte with space to run into behind? It doesn't happen because they're camped in the opposition third. So it is going to be a big change for him.
This is it. There's plenty of things to think about and things to work out in terms of acclimatization. And Billy said here, in hindsight, I'm not sure Grealish doesn't suit City. I think he needs time to acclimatize. Rodri and Fabinho adjusted slowly. I think it's the same, and I completely agree with Billy. I think these changes happen, and Pep likes to do it slowly. And Zach highlighted this. He said, do you think play much next season? Injuries aside, I can see Pep trying to slowly integrate him. I do think there's a worry that if you sign early, you have to just play him. I can't see it, even for Pep. And I know Pep is incredibly tricky with things like these, but I do think he's just going to have to play him.
I agree. I would laugh so much if he turned around in pre-season and said, well, it's Liam Delap's spot to lose, Erling. Off you go, mate. Because actually, Liam Delap is built quite a lot like Erling Haaland. So it's quite funny. So I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing for Delap. One, he's got a great player to learn from, but two, he's basically the same age as you and he's way better. And he's built like you, so it might be bad. It might be bad problems. But I mean, Billy, I think that Grealish, he suits Pep Guardiola in that he's a technically excellent footballer. But Grealish breaks loose and breaks the chains apart much more often than Pep's kind of circuit-based plays and patterns often ask for. So I saw Grealish coming in last season as a slight deviation from the plan and more of a game breaker, more of a player where you're like, well, it's not going to plan. What do we do? Jack, run into the box and get fouled, beat 3 players and open things out in a way that our patterns are currently not doing so. We haven't seen that much from him, but I still do think that was roughly the plan. Yes, partially acclimatise Grealish, but still don't squash the devil inside him and don't make sure that he can still break open and break loose and change things in the drop of a shoulder. And I think that's probably the idea with Erling Haaland too. Yes, you're going to need to make do with fewer touches, and you're going to have to make do with fewer touches in the build-up and on the halfway line as well. You're going to have to be much more patient, and you're going to have to deal with that a lot better than Romelu Lukaku has done at Chelsea with Tuchel. But City can also adapt a little bit the other way. They can go 10% towards his way. They can try to look for him a little bit earlier. Laporte will love that pass into Haaland's feet. We'll love it.
They're going to sign Joachim Andersen off Crystal Palace and just let him play crossfield balls into Haaland's path for the entire season. There you go. You heard it here first. Right, final question before we call this a day. Justin says, if Man City is a pizza and Edison, Cancelo, Laporte, Diaz, Bernardo, De Bruyne, and Mahrez are the cheese and pepperoni and Greenish is the pineapple, then what is Haaland?
What?
Right. Look, I think this is it. Billy says Haaland is the garlic chicken. That's something that Lucas says Haaland is the ranch sauce, an unnecessary luxury for your pizza. Dean would say that the ranch sauce is.
Hang on a minute. There's a picture of me.
Yeah, there you go. You're noticed, mate. There
Come
you
on,
go.
Lucas.
There's plenty. There's plenty in there. So it's going to be very, very interesting. But I do think that, well, we could be excited about this. But I will go back to one final comment right at the top of this, where Alan Hill says Haaland won't score. against Fulham. Things we
He'll be
can
injured.
hope and dream for. He'll probably be injured. Yeah, absolutely. Right. Thank you very, very much for watching, ladies and gentlemen. It's been very much fun to talk about these things and be back doing a live. We haven't done one of these for a little while. Sam, thank you for hopping on with me and talking Erling Haaland.
Nice one.
Wicked. We'll see you tomorrow for the Rank Squad, with the Ranks FC podcast, Rank Squad. Thank you for watching. See you soon. Take it easy.